Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Audacity to Emote web series brought to you by Theater and Dance at Wayne. My name is Devon Redmond, and I will be your host. And we have a spectacular guest today, a really good friend of mine, and one of the most interesting men on the planet, Dr. Ras Mikey Courtney.
I love that introduction. Can I take you on the road with me when I decide that I need an intro man? You could be like that dude from Ray.
I'll offer a voice recording. I mean, it depends on where you're going. If it's exciting, I'll go.
Dang.
If you're going to Utah, might have to strong pass on
Hard pass.
that. No, but thank you for coming on the show, joining us, and this is going to be a great episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, the purpose of the show, we try to get at the heart of creativity. We explore creatives and the journey that got you to where you are now. I believe that the journey of creation is a magical one, and it's heroic. You have to be vulnerable. You have to expose yourself. You have to go further than the world wants you to. Be meaningful. Anyway,
So
so
this show is a half an hour because you wanted me to talk about my journey. So half
it
hours.
is this. I know. It is as long as I think it needs to be.
Okay.
It's gonna somewhere in there. Half an hour, 45 minutes.
Got it.
Something
You
reasonable.
got it. I'll
But
give
go
all
ahead.
short versions. I'll give all short versions.
Don't listen. I want the interesting stuff though, the juicy stuff. Don't
Got you.
get the skimping.
Won't
Uh,
spare the juice.
so first things first. Where are you from? As in, where were you born?
Right. I was born and raised in Northern Virginia, Springfield to be exact. It's about 30 minutes south of Washington, D.C. So I was raised in the suburban area of Washington, D.C. in a very culturally diverse environment at the time that I was a child in the 80s and the 90s. And even though it was, predominantly white, it was still quite ethnically diverse. I had a whole palette of friends that were of different cultural backgrounds from everywhere around the world. So,
And you were there through high school?
yeah, it was one year that I moved. My freshman year of high school, I moved to Converse, Texas, right outside of Universal City, Texas, right outside of San Antonio. And I spent a year down there. My mother had gotten a job down there. She was a nurse at the time, and she had gotten a job with a company down there. And she pretty much asked, like, "You want to move to Texas?" Now, kind of over the monotony of the place that I had grown up in, and went down there for a year. It was the year '92 because that's the year the Chronic came out, and I remember it very clearly because of the influence of that album on my life as a
Yes.
youth.
Wow.
So, and then after a year, because of those experiences down in Texas, my mom was like, "All right, we need to move back to Northern Virginia because the school system was better there." I went to a high school that was designed after a prison system. We literally had to pass through metal detectors every day in Texas at that school. We had a drug dog in our school like 2-3 times a week. Most of the friends that I associated with were in gangs. So my mom knew that that wasn't really the place that I needed to stay in. So she was, and after a year, I was over it too because I missed all my friends back in Northern Virginia. So we moved back, and I graduated. I graduated from the former Robert E. Lee High School, now the John R. Lewis High School.
That's
In
what I'm talking
Springfield,
about.
Virginia.
Progress. It only took 170 years. I don't know.
Let's not veer off into that part of the conversation. You know how I
Yeah.
am.
I got you. But that is amazing that she moved back with your interest in mind. From
Oh,
it's not
definitely.
easy to move from Virginia to Texas. Than Texas to move
True.
your whole life.
True, but at the same time, my mother also was from Wisconsin, and she moved from Wisconsin to the D.C. area with her 4 kids, and then she had me when she got to the D.C. area. So she knew how affluent that particular area, how progressive the suburban area of Washington D.C. was, and so I think she recognized that I wasn't gonna get the same type of I wasn't living in the same type of bubble in Texas as I was living in Northern Virginia, and she preferred that Northern Virginia bubble, and I think I did too. Even though when I got back to Northern Virginia, like that was 3 years of heavy suburban decadence.
So, like, I know that you are this artist that kind of is spans a very wide margin. Like you do a lot of things creatively. So you're a singer, you're a dancer, you're a poet. I think you've like done poetry, right? I know that
I
you've done
mean,
poetry, but
mhm.
yeah. So tell me what came first and when.
Singing, hands down. Singing and
Hmm.
acting was the first for me. I was always encouraged at a young age by my mother to be in the church choir. You know,
Hmm.
refused to because I grew up in a very athletic family. You know, my oldest brother is a assistant coach at the University of Miami in basketball. So him being the oldest, we all grew up with athletics as something that we were involved in. I played 11 years of basketball and 13 years of football growing up, all the way through high school. You know, so I was
Hmm.
more stuck on the general idea of social impression growing up. So even though I was good at singing and was in all the school choirs, you know, from elementary school into middle school, I stopped doing in choirs like my freshman year. Actually, the last time I was in choir was in Texas. That last, and when I got back to
Okay.
Virginia, I didn't want to be in choirs anymore. I was in a show choir down in Texas, so I did like musical theater
Really?
type of stuff. Yeah, I mean that's what they had.
Wow.
That's what they had
Okay.
there. And so, you know, I had done like little musical theater things in elementary school, but I grew up in, like I was saying, I grew up in a predominantly white environment. And as the colored kids, oftentimes there would be two casts for shows. And I would get cast in the daytime shows for all the kids to see. But then the evening shows, the white kids would get cast when the parents could come and watch the show. You know what I mean? So like
Mm.
it
Oh,
wasn't really it wasn't encouraging for me to go in the direction of the arts, but I was good at it. I think a lot of my friends that I grew up with oftentimes harken back to this moment in 8th grade. Actually, my first big dance moment was in 6th grade where we did the Rhythm Nation dance, and I was like one of the people in the front leading the groups. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And then in 8th grade, I was supposed to go into high school in the ninth grade and go to a private school because my brother wanted to go to private school, and I was planning to go and leave all my friends and go to private school. So in the 8th grade choir, in the barbershop choir, I had the lead, and at the closing of the show, we sang "So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday."
Was it
And
a
so
choir or a quartet?
it was a choir. It was
It was a
like
choir? Okay.
it wasn't a barbershop quartet because it was at
Mhm.
least like six of us, I think.
Oh,
Um,
so it's
and
a
so,
circle.
huh?
I
Yeah,
said
but
so,
we were just
but I
called a
got
barbershop choir. Yeah,
you.
just
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
barbershop
yeah.
choir
Yeah, yeah, I got you.
under the direction of Miss Deborah West, who rest in power because she passed away a few years ago.
Mhm.
But she was one of those white teachers that you had that immediately saw my talent and was always like, okay, Mikey, you're going to do this and you're going to do this. There was one guy that was always competing with me, but he always lost out. You know what I mean? Like, and so 8th grade, we do So Hard to Say Goodbye, and I sing it and I'm lighting it up. And at the end of it, I'm like, I love you, Miss West, or we love you, Miss West. You know what I mean? Like at
Yeah,
the end
yeah,
of
yeah.
the 8th grade, everybody crying. You know what I mean? All my friends is crying because I'm supposed to go to private school. Plus, I banged the song out, and it was good. I mean, I wasn't an amazing singer, but I was talented. You could tell I had a talent that could be cultivated.
And let me
So,
just say that let me
go
just
ahead.
butt in real quick and just tell the people that we've mentioned one album and one song that were extremely pivotal to Black culture. One is The Chronic, Dr.
Dr.
Dre's
Dre,
most
Snoop Dogg.
well-known album.
It's where Snoop was introduced to everybody. You know,
Yeah,
after that deep cover soundtrack, this was Snoop and Dr. Dre's first creation together in 1992. The Chronic, not the
yep,
Chronic 2000, which everybody kind of know of, but
yeah,
no, the original Chronic.
the original Chronic. Yeah, that was a game changer.
Yes.
And then Boys to Men. It's
Ah,
so hard.
so hard to say about. Ironic story about Boys to Men in middle school. I think the 7th grade, but the year before that I sang So Hard to Say Goodbye, Boys to Men came to perform in my hometown. There was this little club that had opened up for teenage kids, like a club that we could go to with no alcohol sort of thing on the weekends. And Boys to Men came and performed. It was before they were huge, huge. But this is Northern Virginia and Fairfax County, one of the third richest counties in the United States. So the county had money.
Mm.
So whoever it was that had the place obviously could afford to bring Boys to Men in at that time. This is what, 1991, I'd say, you know. So before those, the Chronic and all that stuff,
Mhm.
middle school years for me, I saw them perform. Got their autograph. A friend of mine got their autograph, but he ended up giving it to me because he knew I was a fan. And plus, I
Okay.
was everybody knew me as like my brother would have me sing to girls that he was trying to holler at. You know what I mean? Like,
I gotcha.
and that was my thing. Like, I would sing to girls that I liked. I remember calling this girl and changing the name, the words to a song, and make her name fit into the song. You know what I mean? Like, I was that guy who wanted to sing all the time.
Okay,
And
and so
then my nuts dropped. And then my boy and then I went through puberty. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
because
there
I
you
was
go.
a tenor. I was a
Yeah,
tenor. And then I went through puberty and two
you dropped
octaves
into
my
like
voice dropped.
a
And
baritone.
so I had to figure out how to use my voice in a different way. Started singing bass, but then left the whole singing vibe and just focused on being a decadent high school kid and doing sports when I felt like it. Um,
So
wasn't
explain
until
the transition from going to high school into college and this what was your major as an undergrad, by the way?
when I started, well, let me just talk about
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
transition. And so when I transitioned from, it's interesting that you mentioned that word transition. I graduated from high school in like '96, the heat of affirmative action.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't have bad grades in high school. I had a relatively B average. You know, didn't do great on my SATs, but I ended up getting accepted to James Madison University, which is one of the most prestigious schools in Virginia. You know, I think UVA is the top, and then JMU is probably right underneath of it.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of my friends from the area were going to that school, so I think that was one of the reasons why I applied. And so I got into the school under the auspice that I would enroll in this transition program. And that transition program meant that after I graduated from high school, 2 weeks later, I would do a summer semester in college at JMU to see if I could handle college level work so that I can enroll in the fall. You understand?
Gotcha.
So it
Yeah.
was a program called Transition,
Mhm.
but it was a lot of affirmative action kids. It was pretty much all people of color. It was like maybe one or two white kids in the whole thing. And this is
Yeah.
a predominantly white school, James Madison University.
I think
So
there's
when I
a program at Wayne called Apex, which I
Yeah,
believe
very
right,
similar. Yeah, very
right,
similar. I
yeah.
think it's similar to Apex.
Oh,
So I make it through the program, and I think when I went in, I was thinking of doing social work. We take that aptitude test in high school, and they said I'd be good at doing social work and working with people in communities, which is true. You know, so that's how I came in, thinking that that was going to be my major during this transition program. I
okay.
realized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So by the time freshman year started, like the fall started, I was a small business and entrepreneur management major. But before the fall started, this is the summer of '96. After I finished the transition program, I didn't get to have my senior summer. So me and two of my best friends drove to Atlanta for the Olympics to go visit another friend of ours that had moved down to Atlanta area. And my sister was there working in Atlanta with her now husband, working in the Olympics for transportation. And so I went to the Olympics, and that was one of those formidable moments. The reason why I can identify all these formidable moments is because I had to articulate them when I did my PhD. So one of the formidable moments about being at the Olympics was the Macarena was huge then, and I didn't realize that was the song that was playing that particular moment. It
Mhm.
was my friends that were like, no, it was the Macarena. When the Macarena came on, you started doing it. We went off somewhere. And then by the time we came back, there was a whole crowd of people watching you and then doing the dance with you. And you were leading them in it. And I was like, yo, I remember that moment of having this crowd around me and being able to hold their attention. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and then went back to school and started as a small business and entrepreneur management major, not thinking about the arts, and was having issues with the academic courses. Like I couldn't pass econ. I was having issues with economics, and I didn't have really good study habits because of how I was in high
Yeah,
school.
similar.
Yeah,
Same
and
thing.
so ultimately, I kind of was my freshman year. I was really doing some soul searching, and a lot of the people around me were helping to cultivate me digging deeper into who I was. And at the time, I think I was thinking about the art. I was thinking about theater. There was a theater and dance program at James Madison University, and I thought about it. And I had met somebody in the dance program who asked me to be a part of a dance competition. And I had no dance training really. So she was like, "Don't worry about it. Like, we're gonna give you a solo and we'll teach you like 16 counts, you know what I mean? Like, and then you'll just do your thing." And so we end up winning the dance competition. Aaliyah's music, TLC Red Light Special. What was the Aaliyah? One in a Million.
Mhm.
Yeah, all of those. TLC Red Light Special. Like those were
Wow.
the songs that we had mixed into the medley of what we performed. When I got out there and did my thing, I was popping, you know what I mean? Like body waving and doing what I did, like as a kid growing up in hip hop. Crowd went up, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like, oh, and the people who we beat were upperclassmen in the theater department. Three females from the DC area, all upperclassmen, juniors, seniors in the theater department. So when I beat them, they were like, "Who is this guy?" They didn't know who I was. I was this freshman that just came in, and like they ain't really choreographed. They danced, so they improv to some go-go music. So that's why they lost. Anyway, they would become my mentors. These people that I beat in the dance competition. After that competition, I decided to switch my major to dance. I thought dance was going to be the easiest. I couldn't read music anymore. I didn't play any instruments. I didn't want to read a whole bunch for theater, even though I knew I could act and I knew I could sing. That was
Mhm.
what took me to dance. I had no idea that dance was going to be the hardest sport or hardest physical activity I ever do in my life. But around the time that I started to discover movement, dance as my pathway is the same time that I discovered my spiritual path as a Rastafarian. So
Right.
as this progressive like lifestyle of movement and human equality and understanding of black equality and black supremacy and that notion
Mhm.
coming into my life, and that back to Africa, understanding that I was an African first, all of these things are becoming very prevalent in my identity as I start to explore what dance is. And
Wow.
so I
So that
changed my
that
major. Within a year, within a semester. By the second semester, I was a dance major.
so that competition was the catalyst for you changing your major to dance and defining
Definitely.
music the rest of your life.
Mm, definitely. And the strange thing
So
was that I was in a theater and dance department, and in that department, I ended up receiving more accolades for my theater than I did for my dance because I was still a beginner with dance. But I got casted
mm,
again. Those theater women were my mentors, so they were like, "You need to come audition for some plays." I auditioned for the lead role in a student-written play that ended up winning the ACTF competition, winning the national competition for a student-written play that year, and I was the lead in the play. So at the end, this was probably by the end of my sophomore or the middle of my sophomore year. In between that time, I went to study at Bates Dance Festival in Maine, where I studied with Rennie Harris and really redirected my understanding of me as hip hop into this contemporary dance and modern dance kind of trajectory.
mhm,
When I did the play and towards the end of the play and was discussing things with the director of the dance program, the dance program was like, "Well, you need to decide whether or not you're going to dance or act," because I wasn't really focused on my training with dance because it kept taking
mhm.
me away for things that we had to do with theater. And I decided that I was going to focus on my dance technique because that's what I was hearing in the dance world about what I needed to kind of catapult me into the next plane of my career, that I would transfer. So I transferred from James Madison University to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. They saw something in me, a conservatory type training, and I had no real classical training. They saw the something in me that was going to be beneficial to the university as well as they felt like I could be trainable. I'm
Mhm.
grateful to the school for taking me in because I learned so much about myself within the dance world, as well as learning that classical and traditional
Was there a
modern dancing.
person at the, you said the Academy of Arts in Philadelphia?
The University of the Arts.
The University of the Arts in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
Was there
yeah.
a particular mentor figure when you were while you were there that kinda like
I had a lot of them.
or it was many? It was many, huh?
I had a lot of them. I mean, all of my teachers were mentors in a way. I mean, one that is still there, Wayne St. David, who taught jazz, Roni
Mhm.
Caress, who also taught jazz, Molly Miscala, who taught jazz. These were all amazing, amazing people doing their thing the way that they did it, but still were in an institution and sharing their experiences with us. My Graham teacher, Pat Thomas, huge inspiration. These were like mothers to me. Pat Thomas and Faye Snow, my Juba, rest in power, Juba. Like, she was amazing because they, black women teaching me dance would check me on my ego when my ego got in the way. I'd be in class cursing myself because I couldn't get the step or the technique, and they would have to pull me aside and be like, "Look, my Graham teacher, Pat Thomas, she pulled me aside one time and said, "Look, you don't really recognize how your energy affects the whole entire class. So I get it, you're hard on yourself and you beat yourself up because you're trying to improve. But you cursing yourself in the middle of the class, people don't know how to take that. So you need to tone it down." And then Faye would always say, "Well, I don't have no problems with him in my class because he works really, really hard." And I was
Mhm.
less like cursing myself in Horton than I was in Graham because of the difficulties of the techniques
And
and the
so you
understanding.
when you finish your time at the University of Arts, you were mostly focused in jazz at that time,
No,
by the
I
time?
was a modern dance performance major for the majority of the time there. I took one. I when I was able to choose my major, I went in. I said I was going to be an education major.
Mhm.
But what happened? Shout out to Connie Michael, who's also a mentor. She was the head of the education department at that time. She would allow me to do what I was doing, but I realized very early on that I didn't want to do all those lesson plans. So I was like, I can teach. Why do I have to do all this lesson plan stuff? No, I'm not going to be an education major. I'm going to be performance. And I switched to performance, and
Uh,
I ended up with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Modern Dance Performance by the time I left the University of the Arts. But before I left UArt, I had already done my first international tour. I took a semester off from the University of the Arts.
what year was
Um,
that?
this is 99, 1999,
Well,
which
I
was
should say, what year of school was it for you? Your
okay, so I started in 96 at JMU. In 98, I transitioned to the University of the Arts after 2 years
Right.
at JMU. I spent 3 years at the University of the Arts. So I did 5 years in undergrad total. So in 98, the summer of 99 would have been the first year that I had been at UArt. I
Wow.
got hired to tour with Raven Simone that summer and to help the guy who was the choreographer, who was my business partner, and this established the company Five, from a versatile entertainer. Back then, we started our company when we were on tour with Raven Simone back in '99, and she was an opening act for NSYNC that year. Yeah, so you know what I mean? Like, I mean, we were on tour with like Mandy Moore. These people that went on to have great career. Nobody knew who Mandy Moore was back then in
Right.
'99. You know what I mean? She was just like some white girl, really skinny, doing pop stuff, and
Was she a Disney kid too? I can't remember.
yeah, in a way. Um, but Raven was never really a Disney kid. Like, Raven wanted to be one of the Mickey Mouse kids,
Mhm.
but her tone was a little bit not on the right side of things for her to
I got
become a Mickey Mouse kid when she was a kid.
yeah.
So Raven got into Disney and blew up Disney. And she had done some stuff for Disney prior to. I remember we were on tour when she went to pitch the idea for That So Raven. I'm not even going to get into the idea of what she pitched first because that may be controversial. But I remember we were on tour in Cali at that time, and she went to Universal Studios to pitch. That would later become 2 years later. She ended up doing that. Like, that's when they started filming That So Raven, and then that changed her whole trajectory on Disney. because the show was huge. So in '99, I did my first tour. Then we took a semester off to do that tour, and then I came back after that semester off to finish my degree at the University of the Arts, and finished in 2001. And the only thing that happened in between the Raven tour and me graduating was the Madonna audition. Audition for Madonna, 1,800 people in New York, and I only went to the audition because Mia Michaels was choreographing, and I knew of her and I liked her work, and I made it down to like the last 81 people, a 3-day audition where Madonna comes in and watches everybody dance. It's a long story, needless to say. I got cut, went back to school, finished up school. That was like in April, so we graduated like in a couple of weeks, and then a month later, I got hired by Pilobolus. And then my life went in a different direction because I had all of this classical and traditional dance technique that I got from this conservatory training, and then got hired by Pilobolus, who uses pedestrian movement to create their work. So I'm thinking that I'm
Yeah.
fierce with all of this modern dance technique, and then Pilobolus, the director in the audition, was like, "That's nice, but can you make it look like you're being electrocuted?" And I'm like, "What?" And I didn't really know who I was auditioning for. All I saw in the newspaper was $21,000 a year, health benefits, touring around the world, 21K in 2001 as an artist, 21K a year. That's a cake up. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there was no way I wasn't going to show up to that audition, and I got hired. Little did I know, again, it would be one of the hardest things that I ever did. Pilates was really, really grueling on my body and on just my understanding of cultural disposition within the performing arts. And I think that my time in Pilates was the catalyst for me years later to go and do a master's in ethno choreology.
Let me
Great,
let me just go ahead and cut in and ask you,
please.
what is Palabras? Can you tell us what that company is?
Pilates is a modern dance theater company based in Washington Depot, Connecticut. That and Pilates itself is a fungus that's about a quarter of an inch big, but can shoot its spores 8 feet into the air. It grows on like cow dung usually, so it can shoot its spores 8 feet into the air over top of the cow. So the idea, the metaphor is that Pilates is a small thing that can produce very big things, that can do very big things. So the company started, and it's always been a really relatively small company, but it started with like 4 guys at Dartmouth who got into movement and used their athleticism to mask the fact that they were embarrassed with performing in this class that they had signed up for, essentially. And
Mhm.
one of the people who was around at the time helped them cultivate what they were developing. One of the first pieces they ever created was called Pilates. So they ended up developing a company out of Dartmouth with Robbie Barnett and Jonathan Walken and Allison Chase and Martha Clark and Moses Pendleton. And later on, Michael Tracy would join as well. So they were a company from New England that established itself in Connecticut, and were doing things using like physics and pedestrian style of movement. They were kind of coming out of that era of Judson Church during the late 60s, early 70s. So weren't looking at dance training as their vocabulary. They were
Mhm.
looking at pedestrian movement as their vocabulary, and would use weight sharing and physics and bodies as sculptures and create these different ideas and images and tell stories with bodies. They were known for not using a lot of props in the early days, but really conveying these human stories, cultural stories through bodies and movement. So it was a different way of processing all of that modern dance technique and classical traditional dance technique that I had, and reconnecting myself with the humanism of movement as opposed to being a dancer. Because I'm a human first. Dance is like kind of what I did as my career. But Pilates reminded me that I was a human before I was a dancer. So I was grateful for that experience. And I was in the company for 2 years, and then transitioned out of the main company and worked with the company for about 5 years after leaving the main company, maybe 7 years after leaving the company.
How unusual is it for someone to be hired for a tour while they're in college and then be picked up by another major dance company. I don't know if they were major at the time but like
Who, Pilawalis?
yeah,
Pilawalis has always been major. Like,
yeah, yeah,
Pilawalis is one of the
I
oldest
don't
American
know.
dance companies.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, like, so they've always been
So
major.
how
Um,
unusual is that
well,
that you
I got into Pilawalis after I graduated, just to be
right, but
clear
right
with
after,
that
right?
timeline.
Didn't you
Yeah, right after I graduated. Yeah.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
auditioned right after I graduated.
how unusual is that to be picked up
I,
by a company, right?
I, I really think it's a testament to my class, because many of us got jobs right after
Okay.
graduated from college. We were talented, you know what I mean, and we left school thinking that we could do anything. So, for many of us, many of us got jobs. Not all of us got jobs in top tier companies or top tier organizations, but we all got jobs, and many of us are still working in our fields. We may have transitioned into different spaces, but a
Mhm.
lot of us are still very, very influential in our field with movement. Um,
What in the program gave you that confidence? Well, like what about your training at the University of Arts
I
that
think
made
the people that I was around, Philly is a major city. So,
mhm,
and we were an hour and a half from New York. So we had that New York vibe, and a lot of the people in Philadelphia, for instance, Philadelphia Dance Company, the main company in Philly, which is like Philadelphia's Ailey, um, they would train with us at school, especially in our Graham class, because our Graham teacher would also teach at Philadelphia. So I think the inspiration that I got from like Tracy Voigt and Holly Wright and Hope Boykin, who's now retiring from Ailey, like I was in class with these people. When our teacher wasn't there, they would teach our classes. The type of encouragement that I got from my peers, as well as the faculty of encouraging me that, like, no, you could do this. No, like, you actually are doing something. And then the more creative I was, the more I realized how unique my lens was. I mean, not to belittle anything within dance, but I'm in many ways an anomaly in the contemporary dance world. I'm a straight male dancer, you know what I mean?
mhm,
And that's not, so my presence is different than a lot of the other energy in that space.
mhm,
So naturally, I had to recognize that within being in that space. And that alone, me being so self assured of my identity, that alone was the catalyst that allowed me to know, like, I'm destined to do something beyond what I think I can do. And my tour with Raven helped that as well, because it was like, yo, I already had my professional tour. I could have left school and not went back and moved to LA and started my professional career. There were students that I went to school with, like Anthony Burrell. He left after his freshman year and went on and had this illustrious career.
mhm,
We didn't necessarily need school. It was the fact that we wanted school, and I wanted to finish my degree. I
mhm.
wanted that piece of paper. I never thought I would go back to school to do a master's or a PhD, but it was the circumstances of my life that led me in that direction.
Yeah, and we definitely have to talk about that before you before you
So
get up. But
we're
I
at
do
that point in the
I got
story.
more questions though. I got more questions, and then we got to go back a little bit because
Okay.
earlier you had said that at the time that you and I'm getting the time I might be getting the timeline mixed up, but it when you went to James Madison, you that was when you were introduced to Rastafarianism, right? Was that
Yes.
a James Madison, right?
I mean,
Um,
it's not when I was introduced, and I don't call it ism. Like, Rastas don't really deal with isms very
oh,
much. It's just Rastafari, yeah, the
gotcha.
movement, or Haile Selassie. So I think when I got to JMU was when I was introduced to Haile Selassie. I already
Mm,
knew about the Rasta movement and its association with the Caribbean. I was a big fan of reggae music. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm,
I could recite Bob lyrics verbatim. I grew up in a family of conspiracy theorists with uncles and stepfathers and all these people that indoctrinated me with an understanding of who I was within this system that I was growing up in. So I had this sort of revolutionary sort of ideal in the back of my mind. It wasn't until I recognized who Haile Selassie is in relationship to who I am and in relationship to to Black history that I could accept Rasta into my life. I was not trying to be like these people in Jamaica. The reason why I call myself a Rastafarian is because of how I identify and connect to who Haile Selassie is for me. Yeah, because Haile Selassie is Rastafari. So there, so yes, that did come into my space at JMU around the same time I started dancing.
Let me ask, how did that affect your creativity? I mean, in all aspects, like, yes,
Well,
as
that's
a
the thing. Like, I mean, anybody who knows Rasta, especially in the dance world,
mhm,
finds it very strange that I'm a Rasta in contemporary dance because the movement has very particular viewpoints about ways of life and is not necessarily as open to certain types of ways of life, the movement itself. But me as an individual, I'm open to everybody, and people make their own choices in life and do what they do. For me, I realized that there were no other people in my space that were projecting this type of socio-conscious idealism within their creative process the way that I was. One of the
mhm,
first pieces that I did at the University of the Arts was called Creation. And it's a song by Peter Tosh. And it's passages, it's like the Psalms of Solomon that he makes into a song.
oh, yeah,
Jah is
mhm,
my light and my salvation, so whom shall I fear? He is my guide throughout this creation, so whom shall I be afraid? You know what I mean? Like,
mhm,
that was me kind of expressing Jah is my king. Oh, like it's a real chanty, like very classic song. And that was the first piece that I ever did at the school.
mhm,
And so I was setting a precedent for my identity within this space. The second piece I ever did was a text in movement where I live sang an original song while I danced. This song hasn't been recorded yet either. But and to this day, people who saw that piece, they're like, "Man, I didn't even realize you were singing. I didn't realize that the voice was coming out of you while you were singing."
you
Like,
thought it was some sort of recording.
you know, and again, it was about who I was, about being an African born in the Americas. And when the sunrise, we have to face today. Open your eyes because we have no time to play. Know why you live so you can find your way and never give in this I walk soja thing. Yeah. So
Mhm,
I'm singing this and moving. I'm exerting who I am within this space and making my presence known. And the fact that it was accepted, I think, had a lot to do with why I stayed steadfast in that direction
yeah.
within my creative process. You know.
So when did the pursuit of your doctorate, like, when did that when
Okay.
did that was that when did you know? When did you decide to
Okay. So we're at this part of the story now.
mhm,
So Palobolis, I transitioned out of Palobolis, the main company, and was still working in their satellite company doing independent projects here and there. I see you rounding. Okay, and Palobolis went to Israel. We did a tour in Israel. And while in Israel, well, when we were going to Israel, I was saying, I can't pass over Africa twice when we go to Israel. I got to make it to Ethiopia. And this is my time. I'm never going to be this close to Ethiopia. I got to go before I come back to the States. And
mhm,
so I booked, rerouted my return ticket after our tour. Our last show, I remember after the show, I couldn't stay for the reception. I literally had to drive from Haifa back to Tel Aviv to catch my flight to Addis Ababa. And so I went to Addis and I was there for about a month visiting some friends and ended up meeting my wife and we got engaged. And I came back to Ethiopia 6 months later and we got married. She got pregnant while she was in law school. So this was in 2006. I sold whatever I had in the States and moved to Ethiopia so that I could be there when she had our son to take care of our son so she didn't have to drop out of school. And so that was my incentive to go repatriate to Ethiopia and to Africa. While in Africa for about 2 years, I was absorbing Ethiopian culture, but did not do too much dance stuff. After about a couple of years, I started teaching dance again, started making dance projects, and started to engage with the cultural dancers in Ethiopia and use some of their material and cultural influences in the work that I was creating. This was the beginning of Ethio modern dance. Prior to that, in the States, I would have been associated with Afro modern dance, which is like this catch all umbrella where most people who are incorporating African tradition into their contemporary dance process would have been associated with. So in 2010, right after my wife finished her dissertation and defended her thesis, we were on a flight back to the States because we were moving to the States because we were going to make that transition to come to the States with our son. And she got pregnant with our second son. I was still working. I was doing work in Philly, going back and forth between Philly and Virginia, where my wife and my sons were staying with the rest of my family, and connecting with the University of the Arts again. And I started teaching in their African Dance and Diasporan program. I started teaching Ethio Modern. That was the first time I had the opportunity to teach Ethio Modern at a university level. And I was trying to get hired in a university full time. And the director, Donna Faye Birchfield, was like, look, we can't hire you unless you have a terminal degree. And so I applied for the Hollins program. They rejected me. And then my business partner, the same one that had hired me for the Raven tour back in '99, both of my business partners were now living in LA. So one of them was Dougie Styles. He was researching a topic and stumbled upon the term ethnochoreology. And it was like, yo, this is what you're already doing, looking at culture and dance and the meanings and all this stuff. Maybe you should go and do a master's in this. I looked at the term ethnochoreology on Wikipedia, and the University of Limerick in Ireland had a master's program. I called and wrote and applied. The course director was like, oh, this seems really interesting. This Ethiopian, like, we don't have anything like this here. Nobody knows anything about Ethiopian dance. Maybe you can do what I did for Irish dance for Ethiopian dance, which was codify it and make it something that people can learn in other places. She codified the Irish tradition. Dr. Catherine Foley. Just had a conversation with her this morning. She's an amazing lady. So
Wow.
got accepted into that program, but there are these concentric circles within my life that we don't have enough time to get into within this interview. But as I got into the program, I got a phone call from the external evaluator of the program, Dr. Anya Peterson-Royce, who's the Chancellor Director of Anthropology at the University of Indiana, who knew me from my time in Pilobolus, had written a poem about me, had thought of me as one of the greatest performers that she had ever seen. She'd used videos of me in her presentations about dance and anthropology.
Wow.
She reached out to me after she found out I was accepted and was like, they don't know who they're getting. I had to tell them, like, you have all of these layers to who you are other than just this Ethiopian component. You're going to offer so much to the program. So I went and did the master's. The family went back to Ethiopia. I went to Ireland, and my research took me back and forth between Ireland and Ethiopia. After doing the master's program and really investigating what Ethio modern dance was through the lens of ethnochoreology, they were convincing me to stay around to do my PhD in arts practice at the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, the University of Limerick. And I said, only if I can have Dr. Foley as my supervisor. And so I finished the MA
Pause real
program.
quick. Pause real
Yeah.
quick. I just wanted to point out because a lot of the people that are going to be watching this are students, and I try to point out just like little nuggets, the importance of like I hate to say
Networks and
network.
building bridges.
I hate to say that word because it's so overused. But what I
It's true.
what I mean is, but yes,
Connection.
the connection,
Yeah.
the
Like
doing
affirming
something.
your connection. Yeah.
Because
Seeing,
the only reason that happened is because you went after Parabolas. If that hadn't, you
yeah.
wouldn't have met. You know what I'm saying? Like the train
Yeah.
would have never
There's
started. You
Yes,
know?
but everything, like, even with Pilobolus, in my audition for Pilobolus, when I realized I was going to get hired, they sat down and they said, okay, introduce yourself and tell us something about you. I said, my name is Ras Mikey. I'm Ras Mikey C. The Ras is short for Rastafari. They stopped me and were like, oh, we did a whole ballet to Bob Marley music. And I was like, they're going to hire me. You know what I mean? So there were these things about who I was that were reflected in, the opportunities that were presented towards me.
Right.
So I get to Ireland. I'm about to finish the master's program, and they're like, you should apply for the PhD program. And I'm like, well, okay, great. But I couldn't apply for the PhD program without having finished my master's. What
Mm,
they did is they accepted me into the PhD program under the auspice of my professional career and my years of experience doing what I did. You know what I mean? Like, and my
nice.
knowledge. So I was kind of enrolled in two programs at the same time, finishing the MA as I was starting the PhD
Wow.
in arts practice research, where it allowed me to really dig deeper into Ethio modern dance, which is pretty much what I did. And before I could finish the defense and finished my thesis, I got hired by Wayne State University in 2017.
Wow.
So before I finished the PhD, I got hired as a guest lecturer at Wayne State University. And again, Wayne State didn't know who they were hiring. You know what I mean? Like, they hired this guy over Skype from Ethiopia. They had never done that before. So I'm
Mm,
coming in as this guy who has this Ethiopian thing, but then I can also teach modern technique. But then I can also teach I have a PhD, so I can teach lecture-based classes. And then I'm also a Rastafarian, so you don't really know how revolutionary I am. And I also have the connections to theater. So I start weaving myself into the program and really, as Black people do, show and prove. So that's kind of what led me into Ireland to do. It was through circumstance. It was me not wanting to tour and be on the road now that I had a family and trying to get more stability in my professional career and be in one place. And that's really what happened. By the time I got hired here, we moved to the D, and I'm grateful because now I have this tenure track position. And meanwhile, all these independent artists that I know are out of work because of COVID. Performances aren't happening. So, got to
yeah,
count my blessings, man.
absolutely.
Blessed
Absolutely.
and highly favored.
Do you realize how jam-packed this past 45 minutes was with information? Your life is incredible, man. You
But
have
these are only highlights, bro.
I know, and I know. I'm just saying, yeah. I'm just this 45 minutes is that's a yeah. You've
So we
that's
didn't even talk about,
quite a journey.
let me close before we get off, because I know we're getting ready to close off. We didn't really talk about my creative pathway. I think it's important for me to talk about how I view myself as a lifist, not as an artist. That's what
Mhm.
it's subjugate. People will subjugate me as an artist, but art is subjective to somebody's valued aesthetic of creativity.
Mm.
For me, lifism, being a lifist, is reflecting and manifesting and transmitting my embodied understanding of these life experiences. So you can't tell me what I'm creating is not life. You can tell me that it's not art because you have a particular value of what art is. So I
Mhm.
tell people a lot of times I'm a lifist because I manifest the beauty that is creation and recognize the valued aesthetic and all of things that life has to offer. There is a design for the creation that we live in. So as a lifist, that's what I attempt to transmit is these life experiences in the work that I create, whether it be through my writing in poetry, whether it be through academic writing, whether it be through the music that I record or
Mhm.
the pieces that I create. I want the audience to feel something and to feel the human experience. A lot of that comes from my relationship with Palablas. This idea of creating this environment for the audience to experience. And when you're performing in this environment, you're living in that environment. You're not acting,
Right.
So I would like to say that my creative philosophy is lifism, is being a lifist and not an
That's
artist.
a novel idea for me. I've never heard that before.
It's
Um,
mine. Well, it's not mine, but I coined the term.
then it
Just
is
like I
yours.
coined
What do you mean
Ethiopia.
it's not yours?
No, I don't take ownership. Like I'm the vessel. So
Oh,
it's the
that's what
thing
you
that
mean.
is,
Okay.
yeah,
I got
it's transmitted through me, but it's for everyone. Ethio
you.
modern bands too. Lifism and life being a lifist, it's something that I want people to assimilate to in their own way, and then research it and take it to the next level.
To
Research.
use their entire life to project their aspirations of the world. Is that's what I'm understanding. Is that right? Would that be right?
To some extent, I mean, I use every aspect of my life to share what I know, and I feel that by doing that, I become a cultural broker
Mhm.
and allow for more understanding of different ways of living to seep into certain people's psyches. And so, yeah, it's simple but complex, you know.
Mhm.
But the complexity comes from how we manifest it through our mind. Life is simple; it's just meant to be lived. And and when you think about art and what we call art, indigenous cultures don't have anything called art. That's a foreign
Well,
term.
yeah.
Pause.
Yeah.
I'm speaking predominantly of creating things that are reflections of life, that are reflections of how you live, and not creating it for the auspice of it being a trinket or an artifact or something to be sold.
Right.
You think about performances prior to colonization. The way that people performed was not for any outside person. It was more so for the livelihood and for the functionality within the community. That's why I create, for the functionality within the community, to provoke and keep the conversation going, and to be a mediator for more human understanding, man. It's our lack of human understanding, or the differences within human understanding, that keep us divided. Everybody keeps running this race. So I'm trying to be the grounding.
That's what's up. And I admire that. And I can see that in your life, the way that you live and the way that you move. So yeah.
Give
Yeah.
thanks, brother.
I wish more people would adopt a similar mentality.
But
And
there's a sacrifice that comes along with it, Devon. It's not
sure.
easy. It's
Look,
easier to
I told
it's
you
easier
before
to
that
live a lie.
I'm trying to be I'm trying to embody some of those traits in myself. Um, and I find it very difficult. Yeah, so I know it's not as easy as it would appear.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to ask you something, because I know we should wrap it up soon. But I wanted to ask you, because like I told you before, there's most of the people that are going to be watching this are I believe students who want to get to know you better, but also are seeking something in their life. They're going through that like very pivotal time where the next decision they can make is going to decide the course for the rest of their life. So if there was like some piece of advice that you could give them, just about life, about creation, about art, anything you want. I mean,
I got you.
what would it be?
So my advice is to recognize that your existence has a purpose, and that your purpose for existence is broader than yourself, and to be grounded in something greater than yourself. If that's a spirituality, if that's a religion, or whatever that is for you, to recognize that this is not by happenstance that this creation exists. So to live a life of purpose beyond yourself for the greater good of humanity is something that I would really want to impart on to students, because I feel as though, and many of my students have heard me say this, I step out on faith every day of my life. And it's the knowing that my faith will carry me that allows me to continue to do the things that I do. And remember that your life is not one moment. So this moment that we're in right now is not your whole entire life. Your life is the sum of many moments. But the power of now, to quote Eckhart Tolle, is so important within how we navigate ourselves through our existence. When we fixate and focus too much on the past and trying to hold on to the past or bring the past into the present, we're that brings anxiety. When
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking too far about what it is that we're supposed to be, or we think that we're supposed to be doing in the future, we're
Mm-hmm.
missing the opportunities that are right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not open. Be open to life. Be open to the experiences of life, and life is going to show you where you fit into all of this. So much of what we learn within our educational system, within institutions, is to get us to function within the realm of the society. Us artists, that's not for us. This pathway already is not the norm of society. Being able to accept that you are not normal and use that as the catalyst of your inspiration, I think will take you further. This notion of awareness, and you've heard me say this before, awareness of who you are, awareness of your environment, awareness of the people around you, allows you to accept yourself within this space with less judgment, less persecution of yourself, and then in turn, less persecution of the people within the space with you. You accept them for who they are and recognize that you can only change yourself, not other people. Mm-hmm. Through those awareness and acceptance, then you get to this space of achievement within what your life's purpose is. But we spend so much time judging ourselves that we never fulfill or don't ever feel like we are fulfilling our purpose. You need to trust that in every moment of your life, you are right where you're supposed to be.
That's real. And what a great note to leave off on. Thank you, Dr. Ross.
We give thanks.
I appreciate you so much for just dropping some gems for us, and that's it.
That's it.
Thank you guys for coming and watching the show. Thank you so much for supporting the Audacity to Emote, and we will see you on the next episode in 2 weeks, I believe.
Remember this is my sign off for all my shows, and I stole this from Russell Simmons. Got to give him the credit. Remember to do you, because everybody else is taken.